Have you ever noticed how some of life's most important lessons don't arrive when we're young? They arrive decades later, after we've spent years worrying about things that never truly mattered, after we've sacrificed our health for responsibilities, after we've postponed our happiness for someday, and sometimes, after we've already lost precious time we can never get back. A few years ago, I met a woman named Eleanor. She was 79 years old and lived alone in the same modest home where she had spent most of her adult life. She wasn't wealthy, she wasn't famous. She was simply an ordinary woman who had worked hard, raised a family, overcome countless challenges, and carried the quiet wisdom that only comes from living through nearly 8 decades of life. From the outside, Eleanor seemed perfectly fine. But one afternoon, while sitting beside her living room window and watching the sunlight fade across her garden, she found herself reflecting on the years behind her, not with sadness, not with bitterness, but with a growing realization that many of the things she had spent years worrying about had never deserved so much of her time, energy, or peace of mind. There were lessons she wished she had learned sooner, truths she wished someone had told her years earlier, wisdom that could have saved her from unnecessary stress, regret, and heartache. What happened next wasn't dramatic. There was no miracle. No sudden transformation, just a series of quiet realizations that slowly changed Eleanor's life. Looking back now, she often says she wishes someone had shared these lessons with her years earlier, because once she understood them, many of the worries that had followed her for decades began to lose their power. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Let's start with the first lesson. Lesson number 1. The day your health becomes more valuable than your money. One of the hardest truths many people discover later in life is that there comes a day when your health becomes far more valuable than everything sitting in your bank account. When we're younger, most of us believe we have plenty of time. We work longer hours. We ignore stress. We postpone doctor's appointments. We tell ourselves we'll rest next month, next year, or after retirement. For decades, Eleanor lived exactly that way. She was the kind of woman everyone depended on. When her children needed help, she was there. When neighbors needed support, she volunteered. When family problems appeared, she carried the burden without complaint. But there was one person she consistently neglected: herself. Over the years, small warning signs began appearing. She felt more tired than usual. Her sleep became lighter. She often woke up exhausted despite spending enough time in bed. Her blood pressure slowly increased. Her joints became stiffer every winter. None of these problems seemed serious enough to deserve immediate attention, so she ignored them. After all, there were always more important things to do, or so she thought. Many older adults make the same mistake. They treat their health as if it were a savings account that can be ignored for years and magically remain full. But the human body doesn't work that way. Every missed walk, every postponed checkup, every month of unmanaged stress, every night of poor sleep, the body remembers, and eventually, it sends a bill. One afternoon, Eleanor was preparing lunch when she suddenly felt dizzy. The room seemed to tilt around her. She grabbed the kitchen counter for support, but her legs felt weak and unstable. Fortunately, a neighbor found her shortly afterward and called for help. The incident wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to force Eleanor to stop and pay attention. While recovering, she realized something that changed her perspective forever. For years, she had protected her savings. She had protected her possessions. She had protected everyone around her. But she had failed to protect the one thing that made all the other things possible: her health. The truth is that money can solve many problems. It can buy comfort. It can buy convenience. It can buy treatment. But it cannot purchase a younger heart. It cannot buy back years of neglected self-care. And it cannot replace the simple joy of waking up each morning feeling strong enough to enjoy your life. As we grow older, good health becomes the foundation beneath everything else. Without it, travel becomes difficult. Hobbies become harder. Time with loved ones becomes limited. Even the smallest pleasures begin to fade. Eleanor eventually made several simple changes. She attended regular medical appointments. She began taking daily walks. She improved her sleep habits and stopped treating rest as a reward she had to earn. Slowly, her energy returned. More importantly, her priorities changed. She finally understood that taking care of herself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. Because there comes a point in life when protecting your health is no longer one responsibility among many. It becomes the responsibility that protects all the others. And that's a lesson many people wish they had learned much sooner. Lesson number 2. The loneliness trap. Nobody warns you about. One of the greatest misunderstandings about aging is the belief that loneliness is simply part of growing older. It isn't. While many seniors expect changes in their social lives, few realize how deeply loneliness can affect both physical and emotional health. And perhaps most importantly, loneliness rarely arrives all at once. It usually appears quietly. For Eleanor, it began after her husband passed away. At first, she appreciated the extra quiet. After years of caring for others, the peaceful home felt comforting. But as the months passed, the silence grew heavier. She stopped attending community events. She declined invitations from friends. She spent more evenings alone in front of the television. Without realizing it, her world gradually became smaller. Many older adults fall into the same pattern. They wait for family members to call. They wait for friends to reach out. They wait for invitations. And while they're waiting, days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months. The difficult truth is that loneliness often creates more loneliness. The more isolated we become, the harder it feels to reconnect. Lesson number 3. Stop living for other people's approval. There is a burden many people carry for far too long, the constant need to be approved of by others. It often begins early in life. We want our parents to be proud of us. We want our coworkers to respect us. We want our neighbors to think well of us. And even after retirement, many people continue measuring their worth through the opinions of others. For years, Eleanor did exactly that. She rarely made decisions based on what she truly wanted. Instead, she worried about what everyone else might think. Would her children approve? Would her friends understand? Would other people judge her? Without realizing it, she spent decades placing other people's expectations ahead of her own happiness. The problem with seeking approval is that it never ends. No matter how much you do, there will always be someone who thinks you should have done more. No matter how kind you are, someone may still criticize you. No matter how hard you try, you cannot control how other people see you. And when your happiness depends on their approval, your peace becomes something they control. Eleanor began to notice this after retirement. She found herself saying yes when she wanted to say no. She attended events she didn't enjoy. She agreed with opinions she didn't share. She worried endlessly about disappointing people. One afternoon, while helping a friend organize old family photographs, she came across a picture of herself at age 25. Looking at the young woman smiling back at her, she suddenly realized something. That young woman had dreams. She had interests. She had a voice. And somewhere along the way, Eleanor had stopped listening to it. From that day forward, she made a small but important change. Before making decisions, she started asking herself a simple question. What do I want? At first, it felt uncomfortable. After spending so many years pleasing others, putting herself first seemed selfish. But it wasn't selfish at all. It was healthy. Slowly, Eleanor stopped apologizing for her preferences. She protected her time. She spoke more honestly. She allowed herself to enjoy life without seeking permission from anyone else. And something surprising happened. The more authentic she became, the more peaceful she felt. The lesson Eleanor learned was one many people discover too late. You do not need everyone's approval to live a meaningful life. You do not need to earn your worth. Your value does not come from praise, compliments, or other people's opinions. It comes from simply being yourself. And sometimes the most liberating moment in life is realizing that not everyone has to understand your choices for those choices to be right for you. Lesson number 4. The hidden cost of holding on to regret. If loneliness steals our connection to others, regret often steals our connection to ourselves. As people grow older, many begin looking back over the decades and focusing on the roads they didn't take, the career they never pursued, the relationship they allowed to end, the opportunity they were too afraid to accept, the dream they postponed until it quietly disappeared. For some, regret becomes a habit. They replay old decisions again and again, hoping to change an outcome that can no longer be changed. Eleanor understood this feeling very well. For years, she carried a collection of regrets that seemed to follow her everywhere. She regretted not traveling more when she was younger. She regretted spending too much time worrying about money. She regretted certain conversations she never had with loved ones who were no longer alive. Sometimes she would sit quietly in the evening and think about all the things she wished she could do differently. The problem was that these thoughts never brought her peace. They only brought sadness. One day, while sorting through old family photographs, Eleanor came across pictures from different chapters of her life. There were photographs of difficult years, years filled with uncertainty, financial struggles, and painful losses. But there were also photographs of birthdays, vacations, friendships, and moments of laughter she had almost forgotten. For the first time, she realized something important. She had spent years viewing her life through the lens of what went wrong. She had overlooked everything that went right. Like many people, Eleanor had been judging her entire life based on a handful of mistakes. But a life cannot be measured that way. No one reaches their 70s or 80s without making decisions they would change if given another chance. That isn't failure. That is being human. The truth is that regret often comes from wisdom we didn't possess at the time. We judge our younger selves using knowledge we only gained years later. And that is rarely a fair comparison. Gradually, Eleanor stopped asking, "What if?" Instead, she began asking, "What did I learn?" That simple shift changed everything. The painful experiences remained part of her story, but they no longer defined it. They became lessons instead of burdens, teachers instead of enemies. The lesson Eleanor learned was one of the most freeing truths of all. Your past cannot be changed. No amount of worry, guilt, or regret can rewrite a single page of it. But you can choose how you carry it. You can carry it as a weight that drags you backward, or you can carry it as wisdom that helps guide the years ahead. And often, the difference between those two choices determines whether we spend our later years trapped by yesterday or fully present in today. Lesson number 5. Why purpose matters more than age. Many people believe that aging is what makes a person feel old. But in reality, age is often not the biggest factor. A person can be 80 years old and still feel engaged, curious, and excited about life. Another person can be 65 and feel as though life has already passed them by. The difference is often purpose. Purpose gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It gives structure to our days and meaning to our efforts. Without it, life can begin to feel repetitive and empty, no matter how comfortable our circumstances may be. For a long time, Eleanor didn't realize how much purpose had disappeared from her own life. After retirement, many of the responsibilities that had once filled her days were gone. Her children had their own families. Her career was behind her. The routines that once gave her direction slowly faded away. At first, the extra freedom felt wonderful. But over time, something changed. The days began blending together. There was less to look forward to. Less excitement. Less motivation. She wasn't unhappy exactly, but she wasn't fully living either. Then one afternoon, while visiting the local library, Eleanor learned about a volunteer program that helped young children improve their reading skills. She wasn't sure she had much to offer. After all, she was nearly 80 years old, but she decided to try. What happened surprised her. The children looked forward to seeing her each week. They listened to her stories. They celebrated their progress with her. And little by little, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in years. She felt needed, not because of obligation, not because someone depended on her financially, but because her presence genuinely mattered. That simple experience changed the way she viewed aging. She realized that purpose doesn't have to be grand or extraordinary. You don't need to start a business, write a book, or change the world. Sometimes, purpose is as simple as helping another person, learning something new, caring for a garden, supporting a friend, sharing the wisdom that only years of experience can provide. The lesson Eleanor learned was powerful. The goal is not to add more years to your life. The goal is to add more life to your years. As long as you have a reason to look forward to tomorrow, there is still something meaningful waiting for you. And perhaps that is one of the greatest gifts we can give ourselves in later life, a purpose that reminds us that our story is not finished yet. Lesson number 6. The most powerful habit you can start tonight. After everything Eleanor had learned about health, loneliness, approval, regret, and purpose, there was one simple habit that helped tie all those lessons together. And the remarkable thing was that it took less than 5 minutes a day. Every evening before going to bed, Eleanor began writing down 3 things. one thing she was grateful for, one good thing that happened during the day, and one small reason to look forward to tomorrow. At first, it seemed almost too simple to matter. Some nights, her list was very ordinary. A pleasant conversation with a friend, a beautiful sunset, a quiet cup of tea in the afternoon. But as the weeks passed, Eleanor noticed something changing. She spent less time focusing on problems she couldn't control, less time replaying old regrets, less time worrying about the future. Instead, she became more aware of the good things that still existed in her life. Not because her life had become perfect, but because she had trained herself to notice what she had previously overlooked. The lesson Eleanor learned was simple. Happiness is rarely found in one dramatic moment. More often, it grows from small daily habits that remind us of what is still good, still meaningful, and still worth appreciating. And sometimes, the most powerful step toward a better tomorrow begins with a single sentence written down tonight. As we come to the end of Eleanor's journey, let's take a moment to look back at where it began. She wasn't searching for a completely new life. She wasn't trying to become younger, richer, or more successful. What she truly needed was a new perspective. Over time, Eleanor discovered 6 lessons that transformed the way she viewed her remaining years. She learned that health is more valuable than wealth. She learned that loneliness grows when we stop reaching out to others. She learned that peace is far more important than earning everyone's approval. She learned that regret becomes lighter when we focus on the lessons instead of the mistakes. She learned that purpose gives meaning to every stage of life. And finally, she learned that small daily habits can slowly reshape the way we experience each day. The most beautiful part of Eleanor's story is that none of these changes happened overnight. There was no perfect moment, no miracle cure, no sudden transformation. There were only small decisions repeated consistently over time. A walk instead of another excuse. A phone call instead of another lonely evening. A new opportunity instead of another reason to stay home. A grateful thought instead of another regret. And those small choices eventually created a life that felt lighter, calmer, and far more meaningful. Perhaps that is the real message of today's video. No matter your age, it is never too late to make a positive change. It is never too late to protect your health. Never too late to reconnect with people. Never too late to find purpose. And never too late to appreciate the life you have already built. Thank you for spending this time with us today. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the channel and join our growing community. And in the comments below, share one lesson life has taught you over the years. Your experience may be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. Until next time, take good care of yourself, stay hopeful, and remember that some of life's most meaningful chapters are still waiting to be written.